Since a couple of movies came out on March 31st, I had to watch those before I can make my list. So that's why I'm actually pretty early, come to think of it. But anyway, I got to see 11 movies in March, and I have to say, out of those 11 movies, this was a damn good month for movies. Come to think of it, every week in March had at least one movie that was 4 stars or higher for me. But of course, there are plenty of movies that don't come to any of the theaters in my hometown because they're not popular enough, they're not mainstream enough, or they're independent, or maybe they're straight to DVD movies. So with that said, I've only seen 11 movies of March, and here are the ones I haven't seen yet that hopefully could make this list. It's going to be a tough list though, since my top 4 are really damn good movies. So the movies that I do want to see that look pretty good is Apprentice, Headshot, The Last Word, Uncertain, The Other Half, Raw, My Scientology Movie, Mean Dreams, The Devil's Candy. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this one, and I don't even think it's a foreign film either. At least the trailer was all in English. Dig Two Graves, Prevenge, which looks like a pretty decent horror comedy. From the House of Willow Street. It looks promising, but it could end up being a bad movie, who knows. I'll find out eventually. Here Alone, and The Black Coat's Daughter, which keeps popping up every time I see upcoming movies and it just keeps getting pushed back more and more. I mean, I think it was supposed to come out last year in February, and finally we get it this year? Or at least we got it in March, I think? I've actually been seeing trailers for it on TV, which is surprising. And I'll add even a few other movies that I don't know too much about, so maybe they could make the list, maybe not. Catfight, Table 19, Brimstone, The Dark Below, The Sense of an Ending, Personal Shopper, Song to Song, One Under the Sun, Wilson, Trainspotting 2 or T2 Trainspotting, whichever way you want to label it. And the only reason this is an uncertain is because I haven't seen the first Trainspotting. If I ever see this, I'll have to see Trainspotting before it, I'd imagine. So I'm not really too excited for it. I know a lot of my friends and cousins were all excited for this movie. Never came to our theater though, so they're going to have to wait. Just like me. And The Leveling. These are other movies I wanted to add because I'm uncertain they could make the best list or they could make the worst list. Who knows? Just want to throw those ones out there as well. Haven't seen any of those films, of course, because none of them came to any of my theaters. So with that out of the way, let's actually get to the movies I did see and the ones that I think are the best of March. And like I said, March was an amazing month for movies. Every week had something I was excited for and something that delivered perfectly. Hell, my top 4 movies of March are all currently in my top 10 films of the year so far. Which, that's pretty amazing. I want to get some honorable mentions out of the way first, because there was 8 of the 11 movies that got 3 stars or higher. There's another movie that I do like, which I won't mention in my worst list, so I guess I'll give it an honorable mention here. Power Rangers. I gave it 3 in my review, but in all actuality, it's like a 2.9 something, so I rounded up to 3. So technically it would be in the worst category, but because I personally like it, I'm not even going to mention it in my worst, so I might as well put it in the honorable mentions here. Also in the honorable mentions, surprisingly, is The Boss Baby. Boss Baby made a frickin' honorable mention. Can you believe that? Other honorable mentions is Before I Fall and Ghost in the Shell. So those are my surprising honorable mentions of March. Let's get to my top 5. There goes the light again. I just love how that happens every so often. Anyway, my number 5 is The Belko Experiment. To some people, this would be an okay movie or just a meh sort of movie, but I really liked it. I enjoyed it. My cousin and my sister went with me, and they all enjoyed it as well. It was some really dark, twisted fun. It was definitely a dark comedy as well as a horror, but there was enough seriousness in it where I felt that there was some craft to it. I felt there was some smarts to it. Just, it was also trying to be fun and not really trying to have a meaning in it as well. So that sounds a little confusing, but that's how it was for me, without it being confusing. There's a lot of characters, there's a lot of actors that I liked in it. I thought all the actors did a good job in the movie. There was a lot of characters to try to keep track of. But you know they're all going to die anyway, or most of them are. And it was actually kind of fun trying to figure out how long certain characters were going to last in the movie. Even characters that don't even have lines that you constantly see in the movie. Like this one guy who we were all thinking he was going to commit suicide because he was just writing this letter and everything. And it turns out he doesn't commit suicide in the movie. And we were all like placing bets on our characters. I did like the moral dilemma of the characters. I did like that the movie had some punches to it, some twists and turns that I wasn't expecting, or I started thinking of something that might happen and it turns out it's something completely different. And there was definitely some gory edge to it and some really good practical effects that I admired seeing on the big screen, because sometimes we're so used to just all CGI nowadays and very little practical effects. This one had a lot more practical effects, I believe, than it did CGI stuff. And that, I gotta hand it to them. That was actually fun to see. And it was grosser to see than a CGI face getting their face bashed in. Yeah, practical effect makeup with the head being bashed in, that's more gruesome than CGI, I feel. It definitely made my sister cringe both times that they did it. And she's just as much of a horror fan as I am, so if she can cringe, it's quite the feat. But it just barely beat Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell was almost my number 5, just so you know. There's like a .02 difference in the scores. That's how close it was. My number 4 was our live-action Disney remake of this year, or at least this month. It is Beauty and the Beast. Yeah, I'm not sure when The Lion King comes out. Is that next year or is that this year as well? I'm not sure. But the Beauty and the Beast, it does follow the same formula, and there's a lot of things where it feels like it's the same movie just done in live action, but they do add enough here and there, especially towards the second half of the film, and I appreciate that. This also was more of a musical than the animated version was, which surprised me, and it surprised me that I like that, because I'm not a fan of musicals. If I actually like a musical, that's saying this is a really strong musical. Because usually the only kind of musicals I like is the dark stuff, like Les Mis and Sweeney Todd. Like, other types of cheery musicals, I'm probably not going to like. But then again, it does help that this has some tragic songs in it as well as the classic songs you expect from the animated version, the romantic stuff, the fantastical stuff. Visually, it was great. It was a great fantasy and something that I admired watching on the screen. Everyone performed their characters really well. I gotta hand it to Luke Evans as Gaston. He was one of my favorite characters in the entire film. But then again, Gaston was one of my favorite Disney villains anyway. Dan Stevens is the perfect voice for the Beast. He was amazingly deep, and when it got to his own song, a new song made just for the Beast, Nevermore I think it's called, I gotta look that up, because it was one of my favorite new songs, actually my favorite new song put into this movie, and it felt just as good as any of the classic songs in the movie. All the voice work for the living objects was really good, and some of them sounded a lot like the animated version. I had no idea Ian McGregor was the Candlestick. I couldn't believe that. There are a few scenes that are recreated in this version that aren't as good as the animated version. Some of them are just as good. There's very little of the recreations that's better, but all the new stuff that was added into it was really phenomenal. The only thing I'm not too big of a fan when it comes to the live-action version of Beauty and the Beast is the new take they had on LeFou. And it's not the fact that he's gay, that's fine, but they made him more of a sympathetic character. They had him as a character with a conscience, and he's less of a crony in this movie, and I'd rather see him as a crony like I did in the animated version. So, I don't know, that's just my 2 cents. Other than that, most of it was just as good as the animated version, and even though the animated version might be still better overall, I did really enjoy this movie. Alright, my number 3 is yet another movie, because when I say March is a really great month, a lot of the movies that I love are movies that people really hate or think are mediocre, and so my number 2 and 3 are movies, big movies, that a lot of people thought were just okay or one of the worst movies they've ever seen in their entire lives, because you can't nowadays you can't have a movie that is just mediocre. It has to be the best movie ever or the worst movie ever made. My number 3 is Kong Skull Island. I love this film not as much as Godzilla 2014, which shares the same universe, but I really admired Kong Skull Island. They did add more giant monsters and more giant monster fights, which I can really appreciate. There is some creative creatures, while most of the giant monsters are just giant animals. The action was good, the acting was solid. Even if the characters aren't that great, the actors really heighten them to a much better level because of just the acting alone. The cinematography was flashy, but it was really great. I love the soundtrack of the movie as well. The visuals were stunning, especially King Kong. When it showed him, I saw it in 3D. I saw it twice. I saw it in 3D and 2D, and when I saw it in 3D for the first time, I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. I did that for Godzilla 2014 as well, and I'll probably do that for any other giant monster movie, because it really helps with the scale, even though the cinematography really helps with the scale as well. And just as much as it is a giant monster movie, it is a Vietnam movie. It is a movie about anti-war. It is a movie about the horrors of war. And it's well integrated into the movie, so much to the point that a lot of people seem to miss that completely. And I think it did a really great job, at least to me, and when it comes out on DVD, eventually I might do an in-depth review to explain in more detail what I love about it. Alright, my number 2 is the other movie that is either mediocre or just plain bad to most people, and that is Life. Alright, it is a horror movie in space. It does have the cliches. It does have the plot line you'd expect from a movie that might mirror Alien. I mean, if you think about it, whenever we think of a sci-fi movie with a monster that's killing people off slowly in a closed-off environment in space, we think Alien. So even though the plot was by the number and cliched and done before countless times, it was done in a solid fashion with great acting, characters that I did like and did care about, and done in a very suspenseful and intense way that I could completely forget about the cliches and the overdone plot. If you can't forgive a movie for that no matter what, then you're not going to like Life. I love the creature in it, I love the design of it, and I love the CGI in this movie. Visually, it is stunning and very realistic looking. And even though I knew what was CGI and what wasn't, I can't remember actually looking at the movie and saying, wow, that looks really off or that looks cartoony. Everything looks spot on. Again, the camera work in this film is good as well, and I have to say, one of my favorite movies of the year so far. Now, of course, you all know what my number 1 is going to be. It's the only movie that has had a high enough score where I could round up to 5. Yes, it's not technically a 5-star movie, but it was enough where I could round up to 5 stars for my review. So you know what this is going to be. My number 1 is Logan. It's a superhero movie done in a more realistic and gritty fashion. It's one of those movies where you don't go into it wanting it to be a superhero movie because it is very different. It's characters with superpowers, it's about mutants, it is set in a future world. But in a way, it is an action road trip movie where they're trying to get from one place to the next, all while being chased by bad guys and confronted by bad guys. But it also has a drama element to it, a family drama element to it, characters bonding, and the characters in this movie was done extremely well. acted spectacularly, and done to a subtle degree that you'd expect in maybe an Oscar-worthy film. Now, am I saying Logan is an Oscar-worthy film? Probably not. There is a lot better dramas out there, of course. And it would surprise me if it gets nominated for something in the Oscars. But it does have more of that technique than you'd expect in a superhero movie. It does have some of the subtleties you'd see in a movie like Hell or High Water. In fact, that's what Logan reminded me of, Hell or High Water. And if you didn't like Hell or High Water, you might not like Logan. It is definitely rated R, and if Deadpool didn't teach you a lesson on whether you should bring kids to a rated R superhero movie, then you're unteachable. And I do have to say, it was a phenomenal ending, a very fitting end to the film. Very poetic, actually. And so yeah, Logan is my #1 film right now, currently, and my favorite film of March. I thought March was an amazing month for movies. Did you think so? And what was your favorite movies of March? And if you like this countdown and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews and countdowns of 2015, 2016, or 2017. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.